Hello there, welcome to Nerd.World. If you're new here, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, also welcome. To everyone, please like, share and subscribe, which really helps this channel grow, which is still in desperate need of growing. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, please check out some of the other ones on my channel. I've got plenty to choose from. This video is the latest in my series of warrior races. I haven't done one for a while, but I thought I'd do a new one today, because I've been kind of itching to get back into these because I quite enjoy them. This one is about the Nietzschean race, genetically augmented supermen from the Andromeda universe. With all that said, let's get started with the video. The Nietzscheans as a people in Andromeda were originally created by a man named Paul Musavini. Paul Musavini would create a clone of himself called Drago Musavini, who will become, in a way, the true progenitor of the Nietzschean race. He was the first true Nietzschean having the bone blades. The original Nietzschean pride, the Musavini pride, was founded, but was eventually overthrown, absorbed or destroyed possibly by the Drago pride, which would later unify with the Katsov pride, becoming the largest, most powerful of the Nietzschean prides, the Drago Katsov, one which would seed many of the other smaller prides throughout the galaxy. The Nietzscheans as a people were created with the idea of a sort of bastardized form of the teachings of German philosopher Nietzsche. The philosophy in brief, which again was somewhat bastardized by a certain right-wing group about 70 years ago in Eastern Europe, was all about superiority and selective breeding, augmentation, genetic engineering. The Nietzscheans took the best qualities of their creator and the other humans, for that matter, who had founded the original colony of Nietzscheans out in deep space, wanting to flee the chaos and anarchy of the rest of humanity and form the perfect race, a race of the Übermensch, the supermen. And I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, I'm not German. Regardless, the Nietzscheans would be all about competition. They believe that competition in all things in life leads to perpetuity, leads to superiority. You must prove yourself constantly. In some regards, Nietzscheans would sometimes be viewed as cowardly, as survival was a very important part of their culture, but to quote Anasazi, you can't always just survive, sometimes you've got to be worthy of survival. That is paraphrasing him a little bit, but basically it means you can't always run away from a fight to guarantee you survive it. You've got to prove your mettle in order to get a wife. The Nietzscheans are all about love and family, in a way. To them, breeding is the most important thing they will ever do. Passing on their genetic material. A woman will only accept a man, for example in Nietzschean culture, if he proves himself superior and strong. The marriages, which are often arranged, like genetic pairings, will only ever be approved by the matriarch of the particular pride that the Nietzscheans are associated with, if the man, and woman for that matter, entering into the marriage are worthy of one another, or have proven themselves. They don't have to be necessarily high-born to marry a high-born man or woman, but you have to be able to prove that you are worthy of that arrangement. The Nietzschean prides are effectively a descended group of this organizational structure, a reflection of the philosophy of the Nietzschean people, that competition is good for business, it's good for breeding, it's good for people. This doesn't necessarily mean that war is necessary. Nietzscheans will war with each other. They will fight. They're human after all. They'll fight amongst themselves, but overall they are unified by common culture and ideology. Now, as I said, wars are not unheard of, but actually Nietzschean prides will come together when necessary. They are more similar than they are different, and will often unify against common enemies or to achieve common goals. They also get particularly aerated if a non-Nietzschean, for example, was to destroy another Nietzschean pride. And for that matter, the destruction of another Nietzschean pride is sometimes frowned upon in general, although it's sometimes also viewed as that pride demonstrating its inferiority by allowing itself to be destroyed. Now, lesser Nietzschean prides often survive by hiding, but there's nothing dishonorable about that. It's all about survival and living and to grow stronger with each generation. As I said, they will compete in all things in life. They compete for husbands and wives. They compete for feats of strength. They compete for wealth. They compete for glory. Now, overall, originally their culture was founded simply to be like a race of, as it was described, warrior poets. They would be, on the one hand, a great race of philosophers and architects and engineers, but also a great race of soldiers, each individual representing all the strengths of humanity. Unfortunately, as their culture grew older, they became more and more focused perhaps on the conflict, because it was easier to prove your mettle by being a warrior than it was to prove yourself as a philosopher. Now, with the fall of the system's commonwealth in particular, the Nietzscheans would devolve even further into an even more brutal and warlike civilization, fighting each other and everybody else in the galaxy. Before the fall of the commonwealth, the Nietzscheans were much more unified, and the conflicts between the prides were more civil dispute than open conflict. It wasn't until really after the fall that open war between the prides became a real thing. Before that, there had been minor conflicts, skirmishes, small battles, maybe the odd minor war, but nothing serious. Nothing that had really resulted in the absolute destruction of a pride, like what happened to the Kodiak Pride, who were completely annihilated by the Dragokatsov. The Nietzscheans would, however, build one of the largest empires in the Tri-Galaxies, pretty much being the dominant power wherever you went. Wherever there were Nietzscheans, they were pretty much in charge. You didn't mess with a Nietzschean. They'd stab you in the face with their bone blades, and then laugh about it. They were, on average, at least 5 times stronger than a human of proportional size, usually. They were much faster in reflexes, hand-eye coordination, mental acuity, and general IQ level, although again, being like any sentient race, there is variety in this. Although you're not likely to meet an obese or even overweight Nietzschean, as their body's metabolism doesn't store fat in that way. They are generally a muscular or athletically built people, both the men and the women being usually quite tall, broad, and again, as I said, muscular. This is because it makes them supposedly the perfect human specimen. They live twice as long as a human, again, comfortably, and generally have an ability to perceive and understand faster and easier than a mortal man, effectively. The Nietzscheans are a complicated and multifaceted species of near humans, and they are in many ways very similar, but in other ways very different. The fact that their entire culture is dedicated, perhaps not entirely to war, but a good portion of it is. Particularly after the fall of the Commonwealth, the Nietzscheans found it very difficult to adjust to a more peaceful lifestyle, always looking for a way to one-up themselves and everyone around them to be trod on and become the dominant power of the galaxy, as demonstrated by Tir Anasazi, who some Nietzscheans believed represented all that was wrong with the Nietzschean race, unlimited ambition, cold calculation, and ruthlessness. He pretended to be one of the boys, one of the gang aboard the Andromeda, until eventually finding a time to fully betray them, unify the Nietzschean prides at the expense of his own son's future, which was very unlike a typical Nietzschean, and then become effectively the emperor of the galaxy, which was his basic goal. As he once put it, he believed that when the end of the universe would come, he predicted 3 things would still be alive. Himself, the cockroaches, and Dylan Hunt trying to save the cockroaches. The one thing he truly respected about his old friend, Dylan Hunt, was his instinct for survival, which was considered very Nietzschean, which was one of their greatest traits as a people. They prided themselves on their ability to survive any situation, no matter what. They were, in a way, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, warrior races of the galaxies, with very few ever daring to challenge them. And they were single-handedly able to take down the Commonwealth, and if it were not for the single battle which destroyed 2/3 of their fleet in the final days of the Commonwealth, they would have emerged from the fall of the Commonwealth victorious. And then the betrayal of the Jaguar Pride, again, as would be a common theme in the long night after the fall of the Commonwealth. Their betrayal of the Dragokatsov resulted in disharmony amongst the Nietzschean prides and total division, and the collapse of what would have been a great and powerful Nietzschean empire. Well, what do you guys think? The Nietzscheans, do they measure up? Are they as good as any of the other warrior races? I think they are. I think the Nietzscheans were one of the best elements of Andromeda. Their basic origin in the storyline, in their creativity, the eyes of their creator, they were created from discarded notes wrote down by Gene Roddenberry. It's basically what the entire show of Andromeda was made from bits and pieces of ideas that he'd had for Star Trek. You can easily draw comparisons between the Nietzscheans and the augments like Khan Singh, because they're basically the same thing. There had been, as I understand it, an idea at one point in Star Trek to have a genetically augmented race of humans living in the Milky Way galaxy the Federation would encounter, and they would have been basically the Nietzscheans. The idea was never really explored. It was explored a little bit in The Next Generation, but not extensively. And obviously you had individuals like Dr. Bashir from Deep Space Nine, who was genetically engineered, which isn't quite the same thing as augmented, as I've covered in another video. Well, with all that said, let me know in the comments below what you think of the Nietzscheans, or if you have any other races you think I should profile in the Warrior Races series, let me know below. I'd love to hear it. I'd like to do a video on them. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.